This message may shock you, but it could be God's instruction for your next season. Don't miss what he is about to reveal. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who is waiting on God for direction. The pressure is loud. Bills are waiting. People are asking questions. Time feels like it is moving faster than your progress. Every morning you wake up with the same weight on your chest, scrolling through opportunities, sending applications, checking inboxes, hoping today will be different. And in the middle of all that noise, God speaks something that does not make sense to the logical mind. God says, don't look for a job. That statement sounds irresponsible to fear. It sounds dangerous to insecurity. It sounds foolish to pride. But faith has never been built on what sounds reasonable. Faith has always been built on obedience to a voice that sees further than your current situation. When God says, don't look for a job, he is not saying don't work, don't grow, or don't move. He is saying stop chasing what I never designed to sustain you. When God says don't look for a job, the natural mind immediately resists because it sounds like permission to be irresponsible. But this instruction is not about promoting laziness. It is about redefining obedience. Laziness avoids responsibility, while obedience submits to direction. The two may look similar on the surface, but their roots are completely different. Laziness is driven by fear of effort, while obedience is driven by trust in God's voice. When God says don't look, he is not asking you to stop caring about provision. He is asking you to stop chasing provision outside of his will. Many people equate faith with constant action. They believe that if they are not moving, applying, pushing, and striving, they are failing God. But faith is not measured by motion. It is measured by alignment. Obedience means doing exactly what God says, not what pressure, fear, or culture demands. Sometimes God instructs movement, and sometimes he commands stillness. Both require faith, but stillness often requires more. It is easier to look busy than to sit quietly trusting God when nothing seems to be happening. When God tells someone not to look for a job, he is often addressing a deeper issue of control. Searching endlessly can become a way of self-provision, where effort replaces trust and anxiety disguises itself as diligence. God interrupts this cycle because he refuses to allow his children to believe that their survival depends solely on their own strength. He knows that if you learn to obey only when it makes sense, you will struggle to follow him when obedience costs comfort. Obedience in this context is not passive. It does not mean sleeping late, avoiding growth, or waiting without preparation. It means shifting focus from chasing opportunities to listening for instruction. It means choosing trust over panic. It means believing that God sees what you cannot see and is arranging what you cannot control. Obedience may look quiet, but it is powerful because it aligns you with divine timing instead of human urgency. This instruction also exposes how deeply identity is tied to productivity. Many people feel worthless when they are not employed, as if their value expires without a title or paycheck. God challenges this mindset by saying, don't look, because he wants to separate identity from activity. He wants you to know that you are valuable because you are his, not because you are useful to a system. Until this truth settles in your heart, work will always feel like pressure instead of purpose. Fear often disguises itself as responsibility. We say we are being responsible by searching constantly, but underneath is fear of lack, fear of judgment, and fear of falling behind. Obedience confronts fear by demanding trust. Trust feels risky because it removes the illusion of control. Yet obedience is the safest place you can be because it positions you under God's protection rather than your own limited foresight. When God says don't look for a job, he is also protecting you from premature movement. Entering the wrong environment at the wrong time can damage confidence, dilute calling, and create unnecessary wounds. God knows that not every open door is a divine door. Some opportunities look good but will eventually limit growth. Obedience saves you from saying yes to something that will cost you peace, faith, or purpose later. This kind of obedience builds spiritual maturity. It teaches discernment instead of desperation. It trains you to value God's voice above urgency. Over time, you learn that obedience is not about understanding everything, but about trusting the one who does. The longer you walk with God, the more you realize that his instructions are rarely random. They are precise, intentional, and rooted in love. Obedience also reshapes how you wait. Instead of waiting with frustration, you wait with expectation. Instead of feeling stuck, you feel positioned. You understand that obedience today is preparing you for authority tomorrow. You are not behind, you are being aligned. What feels like delay is often God slowing you down so you arrive whole, ready, and confident. In the end, obedience is an act of surrender. It says, God, I trust you more than my instincts, my fears, and my understanding. When you obey, even when it doesn't make sense, you create space for God to move in ways effort never could. And when the time comes for him to release you, it will be clear, peaceful, and unmistakably his doing. Misalignment is more dangerous than lack because lack can be temporary, but misalignment can quietly shape the rest of your life in the wrong direction. Many people fear being without money, position, or security, yet they underestimate the damage caused by being in a place God never assigned. God is not as concerned about short seasons of scarcity as he is about long-term damage to purpose. That is why he sometimes allows lack, but strongly resists misalignment. A job outside of God's will may solve an immediate problem while creating a deeper, longer-lasting one. It can provide income but steal peace. It can offer stability but weaken faith. It can give routine while draining passion. On the surface, everything looks fine, yet internally something begins to erode. People in misalignment often feel tired without knowing why, frustrated without understanding the source, and restless even when life appears successful. This inner conflict is not ingratitude. It is the soul reacting to being placed where it does not belong. God understands that misalignment slowly reshapes identity. When you remain too long in the wrong environment, you begin to adjust who you are in order to survive there. You compromise values, silence convictions, and suppress gifts that do not fit the system. Over time, what started as a temporary decision becomes a permanent distortion of purpose. God intervenes early not to deprive you, but to protect who you are becoming. Lack, on the other hand, has a way of sharpening dependence on God. It strips away false security and exposes what truly sustains you. While uncomfortable, lack can deepen prayer, strengthen faith, and refine character. Misalignment does the opposite. It numbs spiritual sensitivity. It replaces prayer with routine. It trains the heart to tolerate dissatisfaction instead of seeking God's direction. That is why God would rather walk you through a valley than allow you to settle in the wrong field. Many people accept misaligned opportunities because they fear falling behind. They compare timelines, salaries, and titles, forgetting that speed without direction leads to regret. God is never impressed by how fast you arrive if the destination is wrong. He values obedience more than pace. When God delays you, it is not because he is slow, but because he is precise. Misalignment also affects how others experience you. When you are not in your assigned place, your gifts are often misunderstood or underutilized. People may overlook your strengths, question your value, or place limits on your potential. This creates unnecessary insecurity and self-doubt. God knows where your gifts will be celebrated, not merely tolerated. He knows the environments where you will grow instead of shrink. God's resistance to misalignment is an act of love. He sees the long-term picture that you cannot. He sees how certain choices would shape your confidence, relationships, and spiritual life years down the road. While you focus on immediate relief, God is guarding future impact. He understands that it is easier to redirect you now than to heal you later. Being without provision can be painful, but being without purpose is devastating. People can survive seasons of lack, but many lose themselves in seasons of misalignment. God refuses to let survival cost identity. He would rather teach you how to trust him in uncertainty than allow you to build a life that slowly disconnects you from who he created you to be. When God closes doors that seem practical, he is often saying that the price is too high. He knows that peace, faith, and calling are worth more than convenience. What feels like denial is actually protection. What feels like restriction is often rescue. Understanding this changes how you interpret delay. You stop seeing closed doors as punishment and start seeing them as mercy. You realize that God's no is just as powerful as his yes. Both are tools he uses to guide you into alignment. And when alignment finally comes, provision will not feel forced or draining. It will feel natural, life-giving, and sustainable. In the end, lack passes, but misalignment leaves scars. God's insistence on alignment is his commitment to your future. He is not trying to make life harder. He is trying to make it meaningful. And when you trust him enough to wait rather than settle, you discover that alignment always produces a reward that lack never could. Waiting is one of the hardest disciplines of faith because it confronts our desire for control. When God calls someone to wait, it often feels like inactivity, but in reality, it is a test of trust. Waiting is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is often evidence that God is working at a level you cannot see. Failure feels final, but waiting is purposeful. God uses waiting not to break you, but to deepen your reliance on him. Many people interpret delay as rejection because they measure progress by visible results. If nothing is changing externally, they assume God is silent or displeased. But God's work is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. Seeds grow underground long before they break the surface. Waiting seasons are like soil moments where God is developing roots that will later sustain visible growth. If growth happens too quickly without depth, it cannot survive pressure. Waiting exposes where trust truly lives. When answers come quickly, faith feels easy. When silence stretches, faith is tests. Ted, in waiting, distractions fall away and motivations are revealed. You begin to notice what you run to for comfort when outcomes are uncertain. God allows waiting because it reveals whether your confidence is in him or in outcomes. Trust is not proven when prayers are answered instantly. It is proven when they are not. God often uses waiting to shift dependence. Many people trust God for salvation, but rely on their own strength for provision. Waiting dismantles this divided trust. It forces the heart to confront self-reliance and replace it with surrender. This is uncomfortable because surrender removes the illusion of control. Yet surrender is the gateway to peace because it places responsibility back into God's hands where it belongs. Waiting also refines character. Immediate success can magnify flaws that were never addressed. Patience, humility, and endurance are formed slowly, and these qualities are essential for sustaining future blessings. God is more concerned with who you are becoming than what you are receiving. Waiting gives space for transformation that would never happen in seasons of constant progress. There is also a timing element that humans often overlook. God sees how pieces must come together perfectly. People, opportunities, and environments must align. If one element arrives too early, it can disrupt the whole design. Waiting protects you from stepping into situations unprepared or unsupported. God is not delaying you because he is uncertain. He is waiting because everything else is not yet in place. Waiting challenges comparison. Watching others move ahead can create insecurity and doubt, but comparison distorts perspective. God does not measure your life against someone else's timeline. What looks like delay in one life may be acceleration in another context. God tailors timing to purpose, not popularity. Waiting reminds you that your journey is unique and intentionally paced. In waiting, faith matures from emotion to conviction. Early faith often depends on feelings and results. Mature faith rests in confidence, even without evidence. This kind of faith is stable. It does not collapse under pressure or disappointment. God values this maturity because it allows him to entrust greater responsibility without fear of collapse. Waiting also teaches discernment. Instead of reacting to every opportunity, you learn to recognize what aligns with God's voice. Discernment grows when you are not rushed. You become less desperate and more selective. This shift protects you from choices driven by fear rather than faith. When waiting is complete, the reward is not only the outcome, but the strength gained along the way. You emerge more grounded, more secure, and more confident in God's guidance. Waiting leaves you better prepared to handle what comes next without losing peace or direction. Ultimately, waiting is not God withholding good things. It is God ensuring that when good things arrive, they do not destroy you. Trust grows deepest in waiting, because waiting teaches you to rely on who God is, not just on what he gives. And once that trust is established, waiting is no longer wasted time. It becomes sacred ground where faith is formed. Rejection often feels personal, as though each closed door is a verdict on your worth or ability. When interviews end without offers or opportunities disappear without explanation, the mind naturally assumes failure. But in the economy of God, rejection is rarely about inadequacy. More often, it is redirection disguised as disappointment. God uses rejection not to diminish you, but to guide you away from places that are misaligned with his purpose for your life. Human perspective is limited to what is visible and immediate. We see a job title, a salary, a chance to move. Forward. God sees the culture behind the role, people who will influence you, the pressures that will shape your character, and the long-term impact on your faith. When he closes a door, it is because he has already evaluated the cost. What feels like loss to you is often protection from something that would quietly erode your peace, confidence, or calling. Rejection also protects you from environments that would misuse your gifts. Not every place knows how to handle what you carry. In the wrong setting, your strengths can be misunderstood, minimized, or even threatened. Instead of being developed, you are tolerated. Instead of being celebrated, you are restricted. God refuses to place you where you will shrink just to fit. When rejection removes you from such environments, it is an act of preservation, not punishment. Many people struggle with rejection because they equate acceptance with validation. When people or systems say no, they internalize it as a reflection of value. God redirects this thinking by allowing rejection to teach you where your validation truly comes from. If acceptance from others defines you, rejection will always devastate you. But when identity is rooted in God, rejection loses its power to wound deeply. It may disappoint, but it will not destroy. Rejection also interrupts unhealthy striving. Constantly chasing approval can lead to overworking, people-pleasing, and compromising boundaries. God uses rejection to break cycles of self-proving. He reminds you that you do not need to exhaust yourself to be worthy. This interruption is often painful, but it creates space for rest, reflection, and realignment. There is also a timing element embedded in rejection. Some doors close not because you are wrong, but because it is not yet the right time. Entering too early can expose you to pressure you are not prepared to handle. God understands that premature access can damage confidence and distort calling. Rejection delays entry until you can walk in with authority rather than insecurity. Rejection sharpens discernment. Each closed door refines your understanding of what aligns with your values, gifts, and purpose. Over time, you begin to recognize patterns. You learn which opportunities drain you and which energize you. This awareness becomes a tool God uses to guide future decisions with greater clarity and confidence. God also uses rejection to deepen trust. When options are limited, faith is stretched. You are forced to lean on God rather than outcomes. This dependence strengthens spiritual muscles that convenience never could. Trust developed in rejection is more resilient because it is not based on favorable circumstances. Rejection is often the final filter before alignment. It narrows the path, removing distractions until only what is truly meant for you remains. While this narrowing can feel isolating, it is purposeful. God is not eliminating possibilities to frustrate you. He is refining direction so you arrive exactly where you are needed. In time, what once felt like rejection becomes a testimony. You look back and realize how each closed door saved you from compromise, burnout, or limitation. You see how redirection led you into environments where your gifts were recognized and your faith strengthened. Rejection, when understood through God's perspective, transforms from a source of pain into a sign of guidance. Ultimately, rejection is not God saying no to you. It is God saying yes to something better aligned with who you are becoming. When you trust this, rejection loses its sting and gains purpose. You stop asking why it happened and start trusting where it is leading. God's process of preparing people privately before promoting them publicly is one of the most misunderstood aspects of spiritual growth. Many people assume that visibility equals readiness, but God values depth more than display. Before he entrusts influence, resources, or authority, he works on the unseen areas of a person's life. Private preparation is where foundations are laid, and without strong foundations, public success becomes dangerous rather than rewarding. In private seasons, God addresses character before he amplifies gifting. Skills can open doors, but character determines how long you remain in the room. Without preparation, success can expose weaknesses rather than celebrate strengths. Pride, insecurity, impatience, and unhealed wounds surface quickly under pressure. God loves his people too much to promote them before they are emotionally and spiritually stable enough to carry the weight of what he plans to release. This hidden work often feels insignificant because it lacks recognition. There is no applause for discipline practiced in secret, no validation for faithfulness when no one is watching. Yet these moments shape integrity. God watches how you steward small responsibilities, how you respond when overlooked, and how you treat people when there is nothing to gain. These private responses become the measure of readiness for public responsibility. Private preparation also refines motives. When success is delayed, intentions are exposed. You begin to see whether your desire for advancement is rooted in service or self-importance. God uses waiting and obscurity to purify ambition, transforming it from self-promotion into purpose-driven influence. This transformation ensures that when promotion comes, it serves others rather than feeding ego. God also uses private seasons to strengthen spiritual disciplines. Prayer becomes deeper when it is not performed for others. Faith grows stronger when it is not dependent on public affirmation. In quiet places, Rillian, CE on God increases because distractions are fewer. These disciplines become anchors during future storms, enabling you to remain steady when attention and pressure increase. Another purpose of private preparation is healing. Many people carry unresolved pain, rejection, or insecurity into leadership positions. Without healing, these wounds influence decisions, relationships, and reactions. God uses hidden seasons to confront and restore broken areas of the heart. He understands that unhealed leaders often lead from pain rather than wisdom, causing harm to themselves and others. Private preparation also develops resilience. When progress feels slow and recognition is absent, endurance is built. You learn to remain faithful without immediate reward. This resilience becomes essential when public seasons bring criticism, resistance, or misunderstanding. Those who have not endured private testing often collapse under public scrutiny. God's timing in promotion is precise. He waits until internal capacity matches external opportunity. Promotion without capacity leads to burnout. Responsibility without maturity leads to compromise. God aligns these elements so that when elevation happens, it feels challenging but sustainable rather than overwhelming. Many people underestimate how much growth happens in silence. While others may not see progress, God is expanding perspective, sharpening discernment, and increasing wisdom. What appears to be inactivity is often intense internal development. God values who you are becoming more than how quickly you are seen. When promotion finally comes, it carries a different weight. Those who have been prepared privately do not need constant validation. They lead with humility, serve with confidence, and respond to pressure with grace. Their authority is not forced. It is recognized naturally. In the end, private preparation is evidence of God's trust, not his neglect. It shows that he sees potential worth investing in. Public promotion is simply the unveiling of what God has already built in secret. And when the foundation is strong, success becomes a place of impact rather than a point of collapse. When God removes work-based identity, he is not diminishing the importance of work. He is correcting the source of worth. Many people unknowingly build their sense of value on productivity, titles, income, and recognition. When these things are present, they feel confident and secure. When they are absent, they feel invisible, anxious, or ashamed. God challenges this pattern because identity rooted in employment is fragile and constantly under threat. He wants your identity anchored in something unshakable. Work-based identity creates pressure that God never intended his children to carry. It convinces you that you must constantly prove your usefulness to deserve respect. Rest begins to feel like laziness, and waiting feels like failure. Over time, this mindset leads to burnout because value is always tied to output. God disrupts this cycle by allowing seasons where work is uncertain or paused, forcing you to confront who you are without performance. God reminds you that before you ever worked, you were already loved. Before you earned anything, you were already chosen. Sonship and daughterhood come before assignment. This order matters because when identity is secure, work becomes an expression of purpose rather than a tool for validation. Without this security, work becomes a way to earn worth rather than fulfill calling. When identity is tied to employment, rejection feels devastating. Losing a job or failing to secure one feels like losing yourself. God breaks this attachment so that rejection does not define you. He wants you to understand that a closed door does not cancel your value. Your worth remains constant regardless of circumstance. This freedom allows you to approach opportunities with peace rather than desperation. God also removes work-based identity to restore healthy boundaries. When value depends on performance, people overextend themselves, neglect relationships, and ignore inner well-being. God values wholeness more than output. By redefining identity, he teaches you to work from rest instead of for rest. This shift leads to sustainable productivity rather than exhausting striving. This transformation also deepens humility. When identity is no longer built on achievements, comparison loses its power. You stop measuring yourself against others' success and timelines. God uses this freedom to cultivate contentment, allowing you to celebrate others without feeling threatened. Secure identity produces genuine joy, not competitive anxiety. Work-based identity also limits obedience. When everything revolves around career, people resist God's direction if it threatens comfort or status. By removing this attachment, God makes the heart more responsive. Obedience becomes easier when identity is not at stake. You can say yes to God without fearing loss of self. In this process, God reshapes motivation. Work becomes service rather than self-promotion. Effort flows from gratitude rather than fear. You begin to pursue excellence not to be seen, but to honor God. This motivation is purer and more fulfilling because it aligns work with worship. As identity shifts, peace increases. Uncertainty no longer feels threatening because worth is secure. Waiting seasons become tolerable because they do not diminish value. You understand that your life has meaning beyond productivity. This peace guards the heart during transitions and delays. When God eventually restores or elevates work, it arrives without the same pressure. You engage opportunities confident. Fly, not because they define you, but because they align with who you already know you are. Success no longer inflates ego, and failure no longer destroys confidence. Ultimately, removing work-based identity is an act of love. God wants you free from the exhausting cycle of proving yourself. He wants you grounded in sonship so that work becomes a place of purpose, not pressure. When identity is secure, everything you do flows from strength rather than insecurity, and life becomes aligned, balanced, and deeply fulfilling. Provision following obedience rather than effort alone challenges one of the strongest beliefs people carry, that if they work hard enough, everything will work out. Effort is important, discipline matters, and diligence has value, but effort without direction often leads to exhaustion instead of fulfillment. God never designed provision to be the reward of striving alone. He designed it to flow from alignment with his will. When obedience becomes secondary to effort, people work endlessly yet remain anxious because deep down they know effort can fail. Many people confuse hard work with trust. They believe that as long as they are doing something, God will bless it. But God does not bless movement simply because it is movement. He blesses obedience because obedience places you where provision is already assigned. Effort tries to create outcomes. Obedience positions you to receive what God has already prepared. This is why some people work tirelessly and still struggle, while others experience provision that seems to meet them at the right time without destructive strain. Effort alone keeps control in human hands. Obedience places control back into God's hands. This is uncomfortable because obedience requires surrender, and surrender removes the illusion of self-sufficiency. When God asks you to obey rather than strive, he is not diminishing you. Responsibility, he is redefining it. Your responsibility becomes listening, trusting, and responding, not forcing results. Provision becomes evidence of God's faithfulness rather than proof of your strength. God understands that effort-driven living breeds fear. When provision depends only on how hard you work, rest becomes threatening. Illness becomes terrifying. Delays feel catastrophic. Obedience-based living produces peace because provision is no longer tied to constant output. You begin to understand that God is not limited by your capacity, energy, or circumstances. He can sustain you even when effort is reduced, redirected, or temporarily paused. Throughout life, God repeatedly shows that obedience unlocks provision in unexpected ways. Sometimes provision arrives through people, sometimes through timing, sometimes through ideas, and sometimes through opportunities you never searched for. This unpredictability is intentional. God wants you to trust him, not a formula. If provision followed effort alone, faith would be optional. But when provision follows obedience, relationship becomes central. Effort without obedience often leads people into environments God never intended. They chase income, stability, or recognition only to find themselves drained, anxious, and spiritually distant. God withholds provision in these spaces not because he is unkind, but because he refuses to fund misalignment. He knows that sustaining you in the wrong place would delay your return to alignment. Provision flows freely where obedience is present because obedience keeps you within his design. Obedience also protects the heart from pride. When success comes purely from effort, it is easy to believe you are self-made. When success flows from obedience, gratitude replaces arrogance. You recognize that what you have did not come from grinding alone, but from God's guidance and Avor. This humility keeps the heart open, teachable, and dependent on God's continued direction. Many people fear obedience because they think it will reduce their chances. In reality, obedience narrows distractions and sharpens focus. Instead of chasing many options, you pursue the right one. This focus conserves energy and increases effectiveness. God does not call you to do everything. He calls you to do what he assigned. Provision follows assignment, not busyness. Effort still has a role, but it becomes purposeful rather than frantic. You work diligently where God sends you, not everywhere fear pushes you. This kind of effort is sustainable because it is supported by peace. You no longer feel pressured to outperform others to survive. You understand that obedience places you under God's covering, where provision is not forced but released. Over time, obedience builds confidence that effort never could. You learn that God is faithful beyond your abilities. You stop panicking when things slow down because you have seen provision arrive without striving. This confidence deepens trust and reduces anxiety about the future. Ultimately, provision following obedience is about relationship. God wants you close enough to hear his voice, trust enough to follow it, and humble enough to rely on him. Effort alone can produce results, but obedience produces alignment, peace, and lasting provision. When you live this way, work no longer feels like survival. It becomes cooperation with God, where provision flows not because you chased it, but because you walked where he led. God creating opportunities rather than advertising them reveals how different his ways are from human systems. People are taught to search, apply, compete, and wait to be chosen. While these systems have their place, they are not the highest source of advancement. God is not limited to platforms, Job B. Boards, or formal processes. He often bypasses them entirely, creating opportunities through obedience, relationships, timing, and divine alignment. This is why some doors open without explanation and some positions appear without being posted. When God creates an opportunity, it is usually connected to purpose rather than position. It arises from who you are becoming, not just what you can offer on paper. Human systems evaluate qualifications, but God evaluates alignment. He looks at heart posture, faithfulness, and readiness. This is why his opportunities often surprise people. They come through conversations, moments of service, or acts of obedience that seem small at the time, but later reveal their significance. Many people miss God-created opportunities because they are looking in the wrong places. They are focused on where everyone else is searching instead of where God is leading. God often hides opportunity in plain sight within daily obedience, consistent faithfulness, and quiet preparation. What feels ordinary can become extraordinary when God decides to breathe on it. God-created opportunities also reduce competition. When something is advertised, it attracts many people, creating comparison, pressure, and striving. When God creates an opportunity, it is often tailor-made. It fits your gifts, experiences, and calling in a way that cannot be replicated. There is peace in this kind of opportunity because you are not fighting to prove yourself. You are stepping into something designed for you. These opportunities frequently emerge through relationships, but not through manipulation or networking for gain. They come through genuine connection, service, and integrity. God connects people at the right time, not because of strategy, but because of purpose. A single conversation, moment of kindness, or act of faithfulness can open doors that years of searching never could. God also uses timing to create opportunity. What is unavailable today may be prepared tomorrow. He waits until you are ready and until the environment can receive what you carry. When opportunity arrives at the right time, it feels natural rather than forced. You step in with confidence because preparation has already taken place. Because these opportunities are not advertised, they often require discernment. You must recognize God's hand rather than wait for external validation. This deepens dependence on his voice. You learn to listen more closely, trust more deeply, and move with confidence even when the path is unconventional. God-created opportunities also protect you from rejection. When God opens a door, it does not require endless approval. The door opens because he initiated it. This does not mean there will be no challenges, but it does mean you are not fighting for permission to belong. You enter knowing you were invited by God, not selected by people. Another important aspect is sustainability. Opportunities created by God come with grace to sustain them. There is provision, favor, and endurance attached. You may still work hard, but the work does not drain you in the same way. God provides strength for what he initiates. People who rely solely on advertised opportunities often feel frustrated and overlooked. God shifts your focus so you stop waiting to be noticed and start becoming ready. When you focus on obedience instead of exposure, God brings exposure when it matters. He knows how to position you in rooms you could never access on your own. In the end, God creating opportunities rather than advertising them is an invitation to trust his creativity. It reminds you that your future is not limited by systems, trends, or availability. God is not searching for a place to fit you into. He is creating a place where you belong. When you learn this, you stop chasing doors and start walking with God, confident that he knows exactly when and how to open the right one. Stillness is one of the most powerful yet misunderstood tools God uses to sharpen spiritual sensitivity. In a world driven by noise, speed, and constant reaction, stillness feels uncomfortable and even unproductive. Yet God often removes motion so that perception can increase. When striving quiets, the heart becomes more aware. Stillness is not emptiness. It is attention redirected from activity to awareness of God's voice. Constant busyness dulls discernment. When the mind is crowded with urgency, fear, and pressure, it becomes difficult to hear subtle instruction. God understands this, which is why he sometimes slows circumstances, closes options, or limits movement. These interruptions are not setbacks. They're invitations to listen. In stillness, distractions lose their power and priorities become clearer. Stillness exposes what noise was covering. When activity stops, thoughts and emotions surface. Unresolved fears, doubts, and desires come into focus. This exposure can feel uncomfortable, but it is necessary. God brings these things to the surface not to overwhelm you, but to heal and realign you. Spiritual sensitivity increases when inner clarity replaces internal clutter. In stillness, you begin to recognize patterns. You notice recurring thoughts, persistent burdens, and consistent nudges that were previously drowned out by movement. God often speaks through repetition rather than volume. When the pace slows, these patterns become visible, guiding you toward clarity and direction. Stillness also deepens intimacy with God. Relationship cannot thrive in constant rush. Time spent quietly with God builds familiarity with his voice. Over time, you learn the difference between fear-driven thoughts and spirit-led promptings. This familiarity strengthens discernment, making it easier to recognize God's guidance even when circumstances are unclear. Another aspect of stillness is emotional regulation. Constant motion often masks anxiety and insecurity. Stillness forces the heart to confront these emotions honestly. As you sit with God in uncertainty, peace gradually replaces panic. This peace becomes a compass, helping you distinguish between doors opened by fear and paths guided by God. Stillness sharpens intuition. As the mind settles, perception increases. You become more aware of subtle shifts, relational dynamics, and internal reactions. God uses this awareness to guide decisions. Discernment grows not through analysis alone, but through attentiveness cultivated in stillness. Stillness also restores sensitivity to timing. When you are always moving, everything feels urgent. In stillness, you begin to sense when it is time to wait and when it is time to move. This timing protects you from premature decisions and delayed obedience. You learn that knowing when to act is just as important as knowing what to do. God uses stillness to recalibrate desire. Ambitions driven by pressure begin to lose their grip, while desires aligned with purpose become clearer. What once felt urgent may fade, and what truly matters begins to surface. This recalibration ensures that future actions are guided by clarity rather than compulsion. In stillness, trust deepens. You learn to remain secure even when nothing appears to be happening. This confidence in God's presence stabilizes faith. When movement eventually resumes, it is guided rather than reactive. You move with assurance instead of anxiety. Ultimately, stillness is not the absence of progress. It is preparation for precise movement. God sharpens spiritual sensitivity so that when the time comes to act, you move in alignment rather than haste. Stillness teaches you to listen before leaping, to discern before deciding, and to trust before acting. Through stillness, clarity replaces confusion, and faith becomes focused rather than frantic. Waiting always has an expiration date, even when it feels endless. God does not call people to wait as a lifestyle. He calls them to wait for a purpose. Obedience in waiting is never meant to trap you in stagnation, but to prepare you for authority. Authority is not given randomly. It is formed through trust, patience, and alignment with God's timing. What feels like delay is often the final stage before release. Many people assume authority comes from position, title, or recognition. In God's design, authority comes from obedience. When you obey God in hidden seasons, you learn to follow before you are asked to lead. This order matters. Those who skip obedience struggle with authority because they have not learned submission. Waiting teaches you how to trust God's leadership, which later enables you to lead others with wisdom and humility. Waiting refines reactions. When answers are delayed, emotions surface. Frustration, doubt, impatience, and fear are exposed. God uses this exposure to shape emotional maturity. Authority without emotional maturity becomes controlling or defensive. Waiting allows God to strengthen inner stability so that future responsibility does not overwhelm you. By the time release comes, you are no longer easily shaken. Authority is also built through consistency and obedience. Waiting seasons are filled with small choices that no one celebrates. Choosing faith over fear, integrity over shortcuts, and patience over panic develops credibility in the spiritual realm. When God sees that you are faithful without immediate reward, he knows you can be trusted with greater influence. The expiration date of waiting is often hidden because God wants obedience to be genuine, not transactional. If you knew exactly when waiting would end, obedience might be motivated by the reward rather than trust. God values relationship over results. He waits until obedience becomes a posture, not a strategy. When obedience is internalized, release is near. When waiting ends, authority is evident in how you move. You no longer rush. You no longer strive to be noticed. You speak with clarity, act with confidence, and lead with peace. This authority is not loud or forced. It is recognized. People sense it because it flows from alignment rather than ambition. Waiting also redefines success. Instead of chasing recognition, you value faithfulness. This shift protects you from insecurity when authority increases. You do not need constant validation because your confidence was forged in seasons where validation was absent. Authority born from waiting is secure, not fragile. God often releases people suddenly after long periods of waiting. What appears to be overnight success is usually the result of years of unseen preparation. The suddenness is not randomness, it is timing. God moves quickly once alignment is complete. When the door opens, it opens fully and you step into it ready. Authority gained through waiting carries responsibility, not entitlement. You understand the weight of influence because you know what it costs to get there. This awareness produces humility. You lead with compassion, remembering seasons of uncertainty. Authority formed this way builds others rather than elevating self. Waiting also trains discernment and leadership. You learn to listen before acting, to seek God's direction rather than reacting to pressure. This discernment becomes a defining trait of your authority. Decisions are made from wisdom, not impulse. People trust leaders who move with clarity and calm. In the end, waiting ends because preparation is complete. God does not keep people waiting to frustrate them. He waits until obedience has produced maturity, trust, and capacity. When the release comes, it feels right. Fear no longer controls decisions. Confidence replaces anxiety. Authority rests naturally because it was earned through obedience. Waiting may feel long, but it is never wasted. It always leads somewhere. And when it ends, you realize that the season you once questioned was the very process that prepared you to carry what God was about to entrust to you.